folded piece of paper, a tiny blanket on a chair, a teenager's laughter caught in someone's memory. One moment, life feels ordinary. The next, it is gone. 17-year-old Ikea Hood would never see tomorrow. A single truth, revealed too late, set off a chain of events that ended her life and shocked the community. On January 7th, 2024, 17-year-old Ikea Mari Hood, a new mother full of hope and promise, lost her life inside her own home in Oak Cliff, Dallas. The person accused of taking her life was not a stranger. He was her boyfriend, someone she trusted, someone she thought would protect her and her newborn. That trust, that love, turned deadly in a single moment. This story is about more than a crime. It is about how jealousy, control, and fear of loss can push a young person to a devastating act. It is about a paternity test, a truth revealed, and a choice that changed everything. Tonight, we take you inside the life of Ikea Hood, the young mother, the daughter, the friend, and the events that led to a moment no one could undo. We explore the relationship, the hidden tensions, and the warning signs that went unnoticed until it was too late. Welcome to True Crime Cave, your hideout for real stories that uncover the darkest truths about human behavior. Here, we dig deep into the events, the people, and the choices that lead to tragedy, shining a light on the warning signs we often ignore. Every message, every decision, every ignored warning can carry consequences nobody sees coming. This is the story of Ikea Hood, a life that ended too soon, and a heartbreak that rippled through her family, friends, and community. Before we can understand the choices, the heartbreak, and the events that led to her death, we need to step back and see who Ikea Hood really was. The young mother, the student, the dancer, and the vibrant person her family and friends loved. 17 years old, a junior at Lancaster High School, a young woman whose life seemed full of possibility, laughter, and hope. Ikea Mari Hood was the kind of person who could light up a room without trying. Her friends describe her as joyful, protective, and supportive, someone who always checked on those she cared about, someone who celebrated their victories and comforted their sorrows. At school, Ikea was more than just a student. She was a dancer, a member of the Tigrettes, and an active participant in community dance programs. The rhythm of her life was built on discipline and passion. Her teachers often praised her dedication, not only in the classroom, but in every rehearsal, every performance, every step she took on the stage. Friends said she was focused, determined, and yet somehow always available when someone needed her. She had a way of balancing responsibility with a warmth that made people feel safe in her presence. Outside of school, she had a circle of friends who trusted her, siblings and cousins who adored her, and neighbors who often spoke of her kindness. She loved to dance, but she also loved learning. Her day-to-day life was filled with routines that many teenagers might find ordinary: attending classes, doing homework, practicing routines, chatting with friends after school. But there was an extraordinary level of maturity in her, a sense of responsibility beyond her years. People who knew her well say that even as a teenager, she had an understanding of life that went beyond the average high school student. Then came motherhood. Just 3 weeks before her life was cut short, Ikea gave birth. Becoming a mother at 17 is a challenge few can fully understand. Yet, by all accounts, she faced it with courage, love, and an emotional maturity that amazed even her closest family. She cared for her newborn with devotion, balancing the responsibilities of a young mother with the duties of school, friends, and family. Her support system, her mother, family members, and community rallied around her, offering guidance, love, and strength during this new chapter of her life. It was a remarkable transition. From teenage girl to young mother, a life so fresh and new, full of possibility and love. Friends describe her as someone who was already thinking about the future, what she wanted after high school, how she could continue dancing, how she could support her child, how she could create a life that was full of hope. Her dreams were simple yet ambitious. Finishing school, pursuing her passions, and giving her child the best life possible. And yet, the contrast of her story is almost cruel. Here was a young woman bringing life into the world, her days filled with the cries, coos, and laughter of a newborn. She nurtured, protected, and loved with every ounce of her being. But the life she had so carefully built and the hope she carried would be shattered in the most violent and irreversible way imaginable. As we think about Ikea Hood, it is impossible not to feel the weight of that contrast. Life was entering the world through her newborn child, a symbol of hope and continuity. And at the same time, her own life was about to be stolen, abruptly, leaving behind grief, questions, and a community searching for answers. She was a teenager, yes, but she was also a mother, a daughter, a friend, a dancer, a dreamer. And understanding her life, her character, and her hopes is essential to understanding the tragedy that would follow. She was not just a victim in a story. She was a human being, full of potential, full of life, and loved deeply by all who knew her. Teenage love is often full of highs and lows, of laughter and heartbreak. For Ikea Hood, it began like many young romances, simple, familiar, and filled with hope. She met Trevon Wright in their neighborhood. Friends, schoolmates, and local connections drew them together. At first, it seemed innocent, natural. Two teenagers finding comfort in each other's company, exploring the excitement of first love, sharing secrets and dreams late into the night. But what started as teenage infatuation quickly became complicated. Ikea and Trevon had an on-again, off-again pattern. There were periods of closeness, moments when everything seemed perfect. Then came the silences, the cold shoulders, the arguments that could start over small things but escalate quickly. Reunions followed each breakup, as if neither could fully let go, but the pattern created a subtle tension that grew over time. Trevon, by many accounts, was charismatic to his friends. Outwardly, he was funny, charming, and sociable. But behind closed doors, a different side emerged. Insecurity lurked beneath the surface. He craved attention, approval, and control. When things didn't go his way, frustration turned into anger. Emotional control seemed difficult for him, and he struggled to manage feelings that might have been normal in a teenager, but became dangerous when combined with possessiveness and jealousy. The relationship dynamic quickly showed signs of instability. Trevon's jealousy often appeared in small, subtle ways, questioning who Ikea was talking to, showing frustration when she spent time with friends or family, or becoming withdrawn and silent after arguments. His possessiveness was intense, creating pressure that Ikea felt but didn't always know how to address. Arguments could flare up over minor disagreements, and each reconciliation seemed to mask unresolved tension, a ticking clock of emotional strain. Friends began to notice changes in Ikea. She became quieter, more withdrawn. The bright, joyful young woman who danced with passion and laughed freely now carried a weight in her eyes, a tension in her shoulders. She worked hard at school and practiced tirelessly in dance, partly out of passion, partly as an escape. These outlets gave her temporary relief, but the underlying pressure at home and in the relationship remained. Many teenagers, even with supportive families and communities, don't recognize emotional abuse early. They may dismiss jealousy as love or control as care. And in Ikea's case, it was subtle at first, almost invisible to the outside world. But over time, the cracks became clearer. Possessiveness, insecurity, and control were no longer just background noise. They were shaping a pattern that would have dangerous consequences. At 17, everything feels like forever. The joys, the heartbreaks, the arguments, the reconciliations. But sometimes, what feels like temporary turbulence can hide danger that is permanent and irreversible. Ikea Hood's story is a reminder that young love, when paired with insecurity and control, can transform slowly from a source of comfort to a source of fear. This was a relationship where early warnings went unnoticed. Friends and family could sense tension, but the gravity of what was building was hidden behind teenage secrecy, love, and hope. The stages of this relationship, the closeness, the arguments, the reconciliations, the pressure, all set the stage for the final, tragic turning point that no one saw coming until it was too late. Even in young love, subtle control, jealousy, and emotional volatility are signs to pay attention to. At 17, life feels endless, but danger can be closer than it seems. Ikea's story is a lesson in recognizing those signs, in listening to instincts, and in understanding that sometimes love can hide a shadow that grows stronger with every ignored warning. Pregnancy is a turning point in any life. For 17-year-old Ikea Hood, it should have been a moment of hope, a new chapter, and a source of joy. She carried her baby with care and love, navigating the challenges of school, dance, and teenage life with determination. But there was another layer to the story, a layer that would become the center of tension, fear, and ultimately tragedy. Trevon, her boyfriend, believed he was the father of the child. At first, he was excited, even proud, about the baby. There was hope in his words, in the plans he seemed to make, in the moments when he appeared to look forward to fatherhood. But alongside that excitement was insecurity, a deep need to control, and an attachment that went beyond normal expectations. The baby became, in his mind, not just a new life, but a symbol of his identity, his importance, and his ownership in Ikea's world. Ikea, on the other hand, felt the pressure differently. She was scared at times, overwhelmed often, and acutely aware that she needed stability for her child. She wanted the best life possible, not just for herself, but for the tiny life growing inside her. She leaned on her family, her mother, her aunts, and close friends, for guidance and support. Their advice was clear. The baby's future mattered more than anyone's pride, ego, or fear. To protect her child and ensure clarity for the future, Ikea decided to take a paternity test. It was not done out of suspicion, nor out of malice. It was done out of responsibility. The test was meant to give her, and the baby, certainty. The plan was simple. She would give Trevon the result when the time was right, a step toward honesty and transparency in a situation already complicated by emotions, love, and adolescent misunderstandings. When the truth came back, it was not what Trevon wanted to hear. He was not the father. For Ikea, it was simply information, a fact. But for Trevon, it was a blow to his ego, a challenge to his perceived control, and a threat to his self-image. The baby, which should have been a symbol of life and hope, became a pivot point for anger and insecurity. The very child that needed love and care became, in his mind, a justification for possessiveness and resentment. The days leading up to Ikea sharing the results were tense. Messages exchanged between them grew sharper. Arguments erupted over small things, and emotional breakdowns became more frequent. Friends noticed her worry, her hesitation, and her attempts to keep peace where it wasn't safe to do so. The tension was palpable, like a clock ticking steadily toward a moment no one could reverse. The day she planned to tell him became the turning point. It was a day that should have been about truth, clarity, and care for the baby. Instead, it became the spark that would ignite a chain of events beyond imagination. The combination of Trevon's insecurity, need for control, and fragile ego made the revelation not just unwelcome, but dangerous. This was more than teenage jealousy. It was a collision of trust, betrayal, and distorted ownership. The baby's truth became a weapon in Trevon's mind, and the pressure building in those final days set the stage for a tragedy that would shock family, friends, and a community. It is important to understand why the paternity test mattered so much. It wasn't about numbers or biology alone. For Trevon, it challenged his sense of self, his need to control, and the image he had built around his relationship. For Ikea, it was a step toward honesty, responsibility, and care for her child. And in the tension between these two perspectives, the danger quietly grew. Even small truths, when revealed to the wrong person at the wrong time, can have devastating consequences. And in this case, the truth about the baby became the trigger that no one saw coming until it was too late. The days leading up to tragedy were marked by warning signs that, in hindsight, seem impossible to miss. Trevon Wright's behavior began to unravel, not in private alone, but in public spaces where the world could see, on social media. After hints about the paternity test reached him, Trevon's posts took a sharp turn. Messages that once were casual or playful became erratic, charged with anger, humiliation, and desperation. He used live videos and long posts to air his emotions, confessions of betrayal, rants about lies, accusations directed at friends and family, and even at Ikea herself. To anyone scrolling past, the tone was clear. He was hurting, embarrassed, and feeling trapped. In these videos, he spoke as if the world had wronged him. He questioned loyalty. He questioned truth. He questioned Ikea's intentions. Lines about people lying to me. How could she do this? And I won't be made a fool littered his posts. There was anger, yes, but there was also humiliation. A young man publicly struggling to manage a private betrayal, leaving a trail of digital breadcrumbs that were impossible to ignore once pieced together. Friends and community members saw some of this, but many assumed it was just teenage frustration, a temporary blow to ego, the kind of online drama common in high school relationships. No one recognized, or perhaps believed, that these posts were a prelude to violence. No one connected the dots between jealousy, control, and the public confessions of emotional unraveling. The pattern in Trevon's post was unmistakable for those who understand the signs. Jealousy over Ikea's independence, anger about her family and the role they played in her decisions, obsessive focus on perceived slights, and repeated expressions of fear of abandonment. He wrote about her changing, about how she was slipping away from him. Every cryptic post, every emotional rant was a signal, a plea for attention, a venting of rage, an outward expression of internal chaos. Yet, in a world where digital outbursts are often dismissed, the warnings went largely ignored. The truth is that social media can serve as a window into someone's mind. The signs were there: anger, jealousy, possessiveness, emotional instability. But without context, they were often seen as drama instead of danger. This is where the reflection becomes crucial. The warnings were in plain sight. Trevon's emotional unraveling, his public rants, and the repeated mentions of betrayal and humiliation were all indicators of escalating risk. In many tragic stories, online behavior is overlooked. People underestimate digital red flags, dismissing them as overreactions or teenage angst. But when anger, jealousy, and control are combined in someone's posts, these signals demand attention. Ikea Hood was surrounded by people who loved her. Friends, family, and peers were present. But even with these signs, tragedy struck. January 7th, 2024, began like any other day on Grambling Drive, a quiet suburban street where neighbors waved from porches, children played on sidewalks, and life seemed ordinary. But inside one home, the calm of the morning would be shattered in a way that would leave a community reeling. 17-year-old Ikea Hood was at home, caring for her newborn child. 3 weeks had passed since she gave birth. She moved quietly around the small living room, folding tiny clothes, gently rocking the infant and speaking softly, trying to carve out a moment of peace in her increasingly complicated life. Her mind, however, was not at rest. She knew the day might come when she would need to confront Trevon, the father of her child, with the truth that would change everything. Trevon arrived, entering the home with a mixture of expectation and tension. He carried with him all the anger, jealousy, and fragile pride that had been simmering for days, weeks, and months. At first, the conversation was calm, almost ordinary, but there was an undercurrent of unease. Words exchanged were careful, cautious, polite in appearance, but the air was thick with the tension of two lives on a precipice. Then came the moment Ikea had been preparing for. She showed him the paternity test results. A piece of paper that should have been a simple fact, a step toward clarity and responsibility, became the pivot point of disaster. The results were undeniable. The child in Ikea's arms was not his. Trevon's reaction was immediate and explosive. Humiliation, anger, and disbelief collided inside him. He felt utterly betrayed. "You made me believe I was a father of this child for 9 whole months," he shouted at Ikea, his voice sharp with anger. "I saw this coming, but you need to know I am no fool." The room was thick with tension, every word charged with rage and despair. Ikea pleaded for him to calm down, her voice trembling as she asked him to lower his anger, almost as if she could sense that something terrible was about to happen. The negative energy in the room kept building, the atmosphere growing heavier with every passing second, until the unthinkable finally occurred. The pride he had tied to the baby, the control he thought he possessed, and the image he had built of himself as a young father crumbled instantly. His emotions were raw, unfiltered, uncontrollable. Voices rose. Word became sharp, edged with fury and pain. Then, in a split second, the situation turned irreversible. A gunshot rang out inside the home. Ikea Hood, vibrant, young, full of life just hours before, collapsed. The room fell silent, broken only by the infant's cries, small and terrified, now motherless. The life that had just begun for the baby continued, but the life of the mother had ended in an instant. Neighbors, hearing yelling followed by a gunshot, quickly called authorities. Police arrived to find the scene of devastation. Ikea had died from a gunshot wound. Her newborn, unharmed physically but shattered in reality, was left in the home, surrounded by loss, confusion, and trauma. Trevon disappeared from the scene. Panic spread quickly through the neighborhood. Authorities launched a manhunt. News traveled fast. U.S. Marshals became involved. The entire community was gripped by fear and sorrow. How could a young life, so full of promise, be ended in a single violent moment? And how could the father of that child vanish into uncertainty after committing such a crime? The events of that morning were not just a crime. They were the culmination of escalating tension, ignored warning signs, jealousy, and insecurity. The paternity test, meant to bring clarity, instead became the final trigger. The day began quietly, with a mother caring for her newborn, and ended with tragedy that would leave echoes in every life connected to Ikea Hood. This was the moment when all the tension, fear, and warning signs converged. In a single morning, a young mother's life ended. A newborn's world was changed forever, and a neighborhood was left in shock. This was not random. It was a result of jealousy, obsession, and warning signs that went unheeded. Sometimes, the smallest moments, a word, a look, a truth revealed, can ignite irreversible consequences. Ikea Hood's story is a harsh reminder. Danger often arrives quietly, but its impact is devastating. After the tragic events on Grambling Drive, law enforcement immediately launched a massive search for Trevon Wright. The teenager had fled the scene, leaving behind the aftermath of a crime that stunned not only the family, but the entire community. U.S. Marshals joined local authorities in the manhunt, coordinating tips, reviewing security footage, and tracing digital activity to pinpoint his location. Eventually, Trevon was located and taken into custody. He was booked into Dallas County Jail, facing the full weight of the law for his actions. While the arrest brought a measure of relief to those mourning Ikea Hood, investigators quickly turned their attention to understanding the motive, the lead-up to the crime, and the warning signs that had gone unheeded. The arrest affidavit provides critical verified details about the case. Investigators noted that Ikea had planned to confront Trevon with the results of paternity test, a decision rooted in care for her newborn's future. That conversation, meant to clarify a situation and protect a child, became the catalyst for Trevon's violent response. According to the affidavit, his emotional reaction to the news, anger, humiliation, and perceived betrayal, directly linked to his decision to commit the murder. Digital evidence played a crucial role in the investigation. Screenshots of arguments between Trevon and Ikea were collected, alongside his social media posts in the days leading up to the tragedy. Live videos, cryptic messages, and rants became key pieces of evidence, showing a pattern of emotional instability, possessiveness, and escalating rage. Law enforcement carefully documented these digital breadcrumbs to illustrate motive and premeditation. Interviews with family members added human context to the cold facts. Relatives recounted Ikea's fear in the days prior to the confrontation. They describe her attempt to protect herself and her child, to maintain boundaries, and a plan for a safe future. Friends reflected on the signs they now recognize, the subtle cues that in hindsight were warnings of danger, the weight of what was missed, what went unnoticed, and what could not be undone, hung heavily over the community. Court proceedings began in early 2025. Trevon Wright was formally charged with murder, facing the consequences of a crime that had shocked so many. During trial, the evidence, digital messages, social media activity, witness testimony, and the affidavit itself painted a clear picture of a violent act triggered by jealousy, control, and emotional instability. In January 2025, the court reached a verdict. Trevon was convicted of the murder of Ikea Hood and sentenced to life in prison. Justice, in its measured and deliberate way, held him accountable for ending the life of a young mother, altering the course of her child's life, and traumatizing an entire community. The arrest and conviction offer a sense of closure, but they also force us to confront difficult questions. How could she have taken the warning signs, the anger, the social media posts, the escalating tension, more seriously? How many tragedies might be prevented if we recognize patterns of jealousy, control, and obsession before they turn deadly? Ikea Hood's story is a stark reminder that behind every statistic is a human life, and that awareness, vigilance, and action can make the difference between life and loss. To understand how a tragedy like this unfolds, we need to look beyond the immediate act of violence and examine the person behind it. Trevon Wright, at just 17 years old, carried a mix of teenage emotions, insecurities, and unresolved fears that would ultimately drive him to commit an unthinkable act. From the outside, Trevon appeared charismatic to friends and classmates. He laughed, joked, and moved easily in social circles. But beneath that surface was a young man struggling to manage emotions far more intense than his years could handle. Emotional insecurity dominated his behavior. Small challenges, perceived slights, or moments of rejection would trigger intense reactions. He had a low tolerance for frustration and a limited ability to regulate anger, a dangerous combination when mixed with adolescent pride and possessiveness. Possessiveness defined his relationship with Ikea Hood. To Trevon, the relationship was territory, something to guard and control. Her independence, her friends, and her family became sources of jealousy. Even the baby, a newborn meant to be a bond between them, became a symbol of control. When the paternity test revealed he was not the father, it was not simply a piece of news. It was, in his mind, a challenge to his identity, his role, and his sense of worth. Fragile masculinity magnified these feelings. Trevon tied his teenage pride to the concept of fatherhood. To him, being rejected as a father felt like being rejected as a person. The psychological pressure, combined with his inability to process emotions in healthy ways, created a volatile environment. Violent tendencies were evident in the patterns leading up to the crime. Friends noticed bursts of anger, moments of verbal aggression, and increasingly possessive messages toward Ikea's social media became a window into his emotional state, revealing a public breakdown that included frustration, desperation, and rage. Live videos, cryptic posts, and rants created a digital trail that investigators would later analyze to understand motive and mindset. Trevon's behavior fits what psychologists often describe as a classic profile of a teenage abuser. Immaturity mixed with possessiveness, volatility, and impulsivity. His actions were not sudden impulses alone. They were the culmination of unresolved insecurities, unchecked jealousy, and a fragile sense of identity. The story of Trevon Wright is a cautionary example of how adolescence, when combined with intense emotional dependency and control issues, can become a dangerous force. It reminds us that warning signs are often visible, even if society underestimates teenage emotional volatility. Recognizing possessiveness, jealousy, and instability early is critical, especially when young adults are entrusted with power over another person's life, emotionally, and in this tragic case, physically. In the days following the tragedy, Lancaster and its surrounding communities were wrapped in a profound silence. Grief hung over homes, schools, and local streets, a heavy reminder of how quickly a life can be cut short. Candlelight vigils became a central point for collective mourning. Students, teachers, and members of the dance community, including the Tigerettes and local youth programs, gathered to honor Ikea Hood's memory. Small candles flickered against the night sky, each one representing a young life ended too soon and a motherless newborn left in the world. Flowers, handwritten notes, and messages of love were laid at makeshift memorials, showing that even in heartbreak, people wanted to remember and celebrate her life. The family's grief was raw and palpable. Ikea's mother relatives and close friends faced a painful reality. The young woman they loved and nurtured was gone. Her newborn, a symbol of hope and new beginnings, now had to navigate life without the warmth and protection of a mother's presence. Every routine, every milestone would now carry a shadow of loss. At Lancaster High School, mourning was visible in every corner. Teachers held moments of silence, and counselors offered support to students struggling to process what had happened. Announcements over the intercom, assemblies, and small support groups became spaces for the community to grieve, to talk, and to seek understanding. Students who once walked the halls with Ikea now faced the stark absence of her presence. Social media, too, reflected the depth of sorrow. Friends and classmates shared tributes, expressing heartbreak and regret. Many admitted that in hindsight, there had been signs, a change in Ikea's behavior, hints of tension, subtle cries for help. "We should have seen it coming," some wrote, a painful acknowledgement that awareness often arrives too late. Videos of her dancing, laughing, and sharing moments of her life flooded platforms, a bittersweet reminder of the joy she brought to those around her. The aftermath was not only about grief, but also reflection. The community had lost more than a life. It had lost a sense of safety, a moment of innocence, and a young mother whose future was full of promise. It served as a stark reminder that tragedies like this leave ripples, echoes of loss, guilt, and questions that cannot easily be answered. Ikea Hood's death did not end with her. It changed everyone who knew her, touched her, or even heard her story. It reminds us that tragedy is rarely isolated. The grief, the questions, and the sorrow spread outward, affecting families, friends, and communities. It calls on us to notice, to care, and to act when warning signs appear, because sometimes small interventions can prevent irreversible loss. Ikea Hood's story teaches us the importance of noticing danger early. Jealousy, control, and excessive emotional dependency in teen relationships are warning signs that should never be ignored. Digital behavior matters too. Posts, live videos, or angry messages online aren't just teen drama. They can reveal obsession, frustration, and potential for real-world violence. Sensitive issues like paternity disputes can escalate tensions quickly. Teens navigating such challenges should never be alone. Family, friends, or trusted adults must be involved to ensure safety. Domestic violence among teens is real. Emotional manipulation, isolation, and anger can spiral into serious harm. Early intervention, open communication, and support can prevent tragedy. If you see warning signs, controlling behavior, jealousy, emotional outbursts, or threats, speak up, alert a trusted adult, reach out to support organizations, and protect those at risk. Awareness and action can save lives. We cannot change what happened to Ikea Hood, but we can change how we respond to warning signs. Emotional insecurity, control, and jealousy are dangerous when left unchecked. By understanding the patterns, taking threats seriously, and empowering teens with support, we reduce the risk of tragedy. Let this story remind us all, vigilance, care, and early intervention can protect lives before it's too late. Ikea Hood's story is heartbreaking, but also invites us to reflect. As we watch this unfold, it's worth asking ourselves some important questions. Have you ever noticed red flags in someone you cared about? Moments of jealousy, control, or anger that didn't feel right? Did you speak up, or did you hope it would pass? Have you ever helped a friend or loved one leave a difficult or abusive relationship? How did it feel to step in? And what challenges did you face in trying to protect someone you care about? Could tragedies like Ikea's have been prevented if someone recognized the warning signs and acted sooner? Could a conversation, a call for help, or even just reaching out to a trusted adult have made a difference? These questions are not easy, but they are necessary. Your experience is your awareness, and your voice can matter. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. We know Ikea Hood's story is difficult, but remembering her life and the lessons it teaches is important. If her story resonated with you, please subscribe to True Crime Cave to stay informed and connected with real-life cases that educate, warn, and inspire. We also invite you to share your thoughts, reflections, or experiences in the comments. Your voice matters, and your stories can help someone else recognize danger before it's too late. Stay vigilant, stay compassionate, and keep an eye out for our next deep dive into another chilling true crime story. Every case we uncover reminds us that awareness, action, and care can make a difference. Until next time, keep searching for the truth, and remember that in the cave of crime, understanding and caution can be life-saving.